Wow. Hey, how you guys doing today? Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for taking the time to be here once again. Appreciate you guys doing that. Today we're gonna go ahead and get through this book a little bit. We've read actually maybe like three, four, five paragraphs from this book and different videos just to highlight certain things. Today I want to read a lot more pages with you um, by a great archaeologist, I would say. It says here vestiges of the Mayas, or facts tending to prove that communications and intimate relations must have existed in very remote times between the inhabitants of Mayab, all right, that's what he's calling the Yucatan Maya kingdoms, and those of Asia and Africa. All right, communication and intimate relations, huh? By Augustus Le Plongeon. All right, so remember, I know for all the people who's been following me for a long time and some of my very old videos, we have the book Queen Mu, which was written by Augustus Le Plongeon, same author here. We've read a lot of Queen Mu and the amazing information in that book, and proving the Americas the true world. We went out from here, civilizing other parts of the world. All right, both sides, going both ways. Okay. It says that Augustus Le Plongeon, MD, just to remind everybody, is a member of the American Antiquarian Society of Worcester, Mass, of the California Academy of Sciences, and several other scientific societies, author of various essays and scientific works. Okay, again, Queen Mu is one of them. And most likely he is a Freemason, which I think we have read that before, but that doesn't take away from the research that we can verify and what he has found here. We're gonna belly flop to a part of this book since it talks about the geography first, and then it gets into the correlation, the proofs that he has here to say that there is vestiges of the Mayas and the other people in the old world communicating with each other and having relations. Okay, so we go to page 15 of this book, belly flop here again. After he's done talking about the geography and all that in the area, it says here, I will not describe here the majestic monuments raised by the Mayas. Mrs. Le Plongeon, all right, that's his wife who helped him with the explorations and also with the writing of books and stuff. It says in her letters to the New York World, has given of those of Uxmal, Aki, almost like saying brother, Aki, and Mayapan, the only correct description ever published. That's what he's saying about his wife. I'm not here to talk about the monuments. Let's talk about something else. All right. So we got many videos on the monuments. Make sure to catch up. All right. It says here, my object at present is to relate some of the curious facts revealed to us by their weather-beaten and crumbling walls, and show how erroneous is the opinion of some European scientists who think it not worthwhile to give a moment of their precious time to the study of American archaeology. All right, they were neglecting it. Listen, at those times, this was written in the 1800s, this book. They weren't trying to pay attention to the Americas. They were just coming in to these jungles. They didn't know anything. They didn't want to give no time to the study of American archaeology because, say they, no relations have ever been found to have existed between the monuments and civilizations of the inhabitants of this continent and those of the old world. That's what he's saying. The naysayers are saying, right? They don't even want to look because they don't want it to be correct. They want to go with their false narratives, what they were indoctrinated with. On what ground they hazard such an opinion, it is difficult to surmise, since to my knowledge, the ancient ruined cities of Yucatan until lately have never been thoroughly, much less scientifically explored. All right, he has a point there. How can they say there's no correlation or relation there with the so-called old world when they haven't even gone there to explore, guys? This is what I was just saying. They was just coming into these places, finding these cities and ruins, jungle growing on them and stuff, in the 1800s. The same is true of the other monumental ruins of the whole of Central America. They hadn't explored any of it. They already had written their historical books about so-called ancient Egypt, so-called Mesopotamia, and all that old world stuff, supposedly, when they hadn't even explored this region of the world, guys. You understand? That's big. And that's the history we get. We get the same history they were teaching, they already had published in their books before even actually exploring the whole world, knowing about the history here and the archaeology and the anthropology and all that here. They already had made up their minds, and that's the same school indoctrination we still get today. They haven't really updated it. When Mrs. Leplejon and myself landed at Progreso in 1873, we thought that because we had read the works of Stevens, Waldeck, Norman, Friedrichstall, carefully examined the few photographic views made by Mr. Charney of some of the monuments, we knew all about them. Alas, vain presumption. All right, he's being honest right here. He said, I thought I knew about the ruins and about Yucatan just from reading people's books. But he was wrong. He's admitting that was a vain presumption. When in presence of the antique shrines and palaces of the Mayas, we soon saw how mistaken we had been, how little those writers had seen of the monuments they had pretended to describe, all right? They hadn't really seen them that good. That the work of studying them systematically was not even begun, and that many years of close observation and patient labor would be necessary in order to dispel the mysteries which hang over them, and to discover the hidden meaning of their ornaments and inscriptions. To this difficult task, we resolved to dedicate our time and to concentrate our efforts to find a solution, if possible, to the enigma. We began our work by taking photographs of all the monuments in their out and symbol, and in all their details as much as practicable. Next, we surveyed them carefully, made accurate plans of them in order to be able to comprehend, by the disposition of their different parts, for what possible use they were erected, taking as a starting point that the human mind and human inclinations and wants are the same in all times, in all countries, in all races when civilized and cultured. We next carefully examined what connection the ornaments bore to each other and tried to understand the meaning of the designs. At first, the maze of these designs seemed a very difficult riddle to solve, yet we believed that if a human intelligence had devised it, another human intelligence would certainly be able to unravel it. It was not, however, until we had nearly completed the tracing and study of the mural paintings still extant in the funeral chamber of Chaacmol, or room built on the top of the eastern wall of the gymnasium at Chichen Itza, at its southern end, that Stevens mistook for a shrine dedicated to the god of the players at ball. You guys hear that? So Stevens was writing some other unrelated, right, actions that he said were going on in this place, and the uses, right, the use of it. He was calling it a shrine to the gods when it was a gymnasium. It was a gym. He called it, it was the shrine for the god of the ball players at ball. That a glimmer of light began to dawn upon us. In tracing the figure of Chaacmol in battle, I remarked that the shield worn by him had painted on it round green spots. Listen to this, guys, because we got this in a little bit in the Queen Mu. All right, and what he said about Isis and the Sphinx. You guys remember? Right? Who was Queen Mu? It was Isis. Queen Isis means little sister. Now, he might get into that here. So listen to what he's finding in this stone sculpture. Right? It says, in tracing the figure of Chaacmol in battle, I remarked that the shield worn by him had painted on it round green spots and was exactly like the ornaments placed between tiger and tiger on the entablature of the same monument. I naturally concluded that the monument had been raised to the memory of the warrior bearing the shield, that the tigers represented his totem, and that Chaacmol, or Balam, Maya words for spotted tiger or leopard. Now, guys, listen, a spotted leopard or tiger, right? Well, we're talking about the Americas. Who are they talking about, guys? Who are they talking about? talking about jaguars, right? He's a jaguar. He got jaguar spots. Ain't no tigers or leopards. Leopards are from Africa, all right? Tigers, you already know. But we had tigers, we had our own type in the Ice Age, so-called Ice Ages before, whatever happened. But either way, right here, they're talking about jaguars. Let's get that clear. We're talking about spotted jaguar. Chaacmol or Balam, the Maya words for jaguar, was his name. I then remembered that at about 100 yards in the thicket from the edifice, in an easterly direction, a few days before, I had noticed the ruins of a remarkable mound of rather small dimensions. It was ornamented with slabs engraved with the images of spotted tigers, eating human hearts, forming magnificent bas reliefs conserving yet traces of the colors in which it was formerly painted. I repaired to the place. Doubts were no longer possible. The same round dots forming the spots of their skins were present here on the shield of the warrior in battle. All right, we're talking about jaguar warriors, and that on the entablature of the building. On examining carefully the ground around the mound, I soon stumbled upon what seemed to be a half-buried statue. On clearing the debris, we found a statue in the round, representing a wounded tiger reclining on his right side. All right, a wounded jaguar. 3 holes in the back indicated the places where he received his wounds. It was headless. A few feet further, I found a human head, with the eyes half closed and those of a dying person. When placed on the neck of the tiger, it fitted exactly. All right, do you guys hear that? He's finding literally a sphinx. He found a statue that had a human of a jaguar, a body of a jaguar, and the head of a human. This is what he's finding here, right? A sphinx. And this is what he says. I propped it with sticks to keep it in place. So arranged, it recalled vividly the Chaldean and Egyptian deities having heads of human beings and bodies of animals, okay? The true old world here. The next object that called my attention was another slab on which was represented in bas relief a dying warrior. Reclining on his back, the head was thrown entirely backwards. His left arm was placed across his chest. The left hand rested on the right shoulder, exactly in the same position which the Egyptians were wont, just like the Egyptians, all right, at times to give to the mummies of some of their eminent men. From his mouth was seen escaping 2 thin, narrow flames, the spirit of the dying man abandoning the body with the last warm breath. These and many other sculptures caused me to suspect that this monument had been the mausoleum raised to the memory of the warrior with the shield covered with the round dots, or the jaguar, literally with the jaguar skin on him. Next to the slabs engraved with the image of jaguars was another, representing an aura militaris, a bird of the parrot species, very large and of brilliant plumage of various colors. I took it for the totem of his wife, Mu. Listen, Mu, right? Queen Mu, Maka. And so it proved to be when later I was able to interpret their ideographic writings. Kinik Chaacmol, after her death, obtained the honors of the apotheosis, had temples raised to her memory, and was worshipped at Samal up to the time of the Spanish conquest, according to Landa, Pogo, Judo, and Lisana. All these 3 people correlated what he's saying. There was a lady by that name, all right? And if guys, I don't know if he's going to explain this, but how he's interpreting the Maya glyphs, you know how he's doing that, guys? We read this already. We know about Le Plongeon. He used an old ancient Egyptian script or knowledge of that to be able to read the Maya glyphs, guys. Yes, same story. And he was right when he interpreted the story, because Landa and Kokju, these people from different periods. Landa was actually there in the 1500s. He said the exact same thing. So he translated it correctly using an ancient type of knowledge of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Okay, that shows you where's the original. Here, we already know this is the true Egypt. Satisfied that I had found the tomb of a great warrior among the Mayas, I resolved to make an excavation, notwithstanding I had no tools or implements proper for such work. After 2 months of hard toil, after penetrating through 3 level floors painted with yellow ochre, at last a large stone urn came in sight. It was opened in presence of Colonel D. Daniel Trachonis. It contained a small heap of grayish dust over which lay the cover of a terracotta pot, also painted yellow, a few small ornaments of nacre that crumbled to dust on being touched, and a large ball of jade, with a hole pierced in the middle. This ball had at one time been highly polished, but for some cause or other the polish had disappeared from one side. Near and lower than the urn was discovered the head of the colossal statue. Today, the best or one of the best pieces in the National Museum of Mexico. Ha! Having been carried thither on board the gunboat Libertad. A colossal statue, huh? The head of a colossal statue. Having been carried thither on the Libertad without my consent and without any remuneration, having even been offered by the Mexican government for my labor, my time, and the money spent in the discovery. You hear that? So he was the one funding his own exploration. Remember, this guy had money. He was, he had his own stuff, you know, and he went and found all this stuff, and they took it without his permission. They put it in the museum. They didn't even give him credit for it. All right. Close to the chest of the statue was another stone urn, much larger than the first. On being uncovered, it was found to contain a large quantity of reddish substance and some jade ornaments. On closely examining this substance, I pronounced it organic matter that had been subjected to a very great heat in an open vessel. A chemical analysis of some of it by Professor Thompson of Worcester, Mass., at the request of Mr. Stephen Salisbury, Jr., confirmed my opinion. From the position of the urn, I made up my mind that its content were the heart and viscera of the personage represented by the statue, while the dust found in the first urn must have been the residue of his brains. Wow. Just like the Egyptians, right? Burying them in urns, right? The organs, the same thing. Londa tells us that it was the custom, even at the time of the Spanish conquest, when a person of eminence died, to make images of stone or terracotta or wood in the semblance of the deceased, whose ashes were placed in a hollow made on the back of the head for the purpose. Feeling sorry for having thus disturbed the remains of Chaacmol, so carefully concealed by his friends and relatives many centuries ago, in order to save them from further desecration, I burned the greater part, reserving only a small quantity for future analysis. This finding of the heart and brains of that chieftain afforded an explanation, if any was needed, of one of the scenes more artistically portrayed in the mural paintings of his funeral chamber. In this scene, which is painted immediately over the entrance of the chamber, where is also a life-size representation of his corpse prepared for cremation, the dead warrior is pictured stretched on the ground, his back resting on a large stone placed for the purpose of raising the body and keeping open the cut made across it, under the ribs for the extraction of the heart and other parts it was customary to preserve. These are seen in the hands of his children. At the feet of the statue were found a number of beautiful arrowheads of flint and chalcedony, also beads that form part of his necklace. These, today petrified, seem to have been originally of bone or ivory. They were wrought to figure shells of periwinkles. Surrounding the slab on which the figure rests was a large quantity of dried blood. This fact might lead us to suppose that slaves were sacrificed at his funeral, all right, or a crematory. We. This is what they always say. They conjecture sacrifice always, of course. As Herodotus tells us, it was customary with the Scythians. Who's the Scythians or Saxons, sons of Isaac, huh? Buddha was a Scythian, wasn't he? Or a Sakai? And we know it was with the Romans and other nations of the Old World and the Incas in Peru. Yet not a bone or any other human remains were found in the mausoleum, all right? So what are you talking about, sacrifice? The statue forms a single piece with the slab on which it reclines, as if about to rise on his elbows, the legs being drawn up so that the feet rest flat on the slab. I consider this attitude given to the statues of dead personages that I have discovered in Chichen, where they are still to be symbolical of their belief in reincarnation. They, in common with the Egyptians and the Hindus, all right, the Hindus and other nations of antiquity held that the spirit of man, after being made to suffer for his shortcomings during his mundane life, would enjoy happiness for a time proportionate to his good deeds, then return to earth, animate the body, and live again in material existence. Wow. So it's not forever. You got to come back. You got to do it again. The Mayas, however, destroying the body by fire, made statues in the semblance of the deceased so that, being indestructible, the spirit might find and animate them on its return to earth. So find the statues and animate them, okay, on their return. That's what he's saying, right? That's how they're interpreting. The present Aborigines have the same belief. Even today, they never fail to prepare the hanal piksam, the food for the spirits which they place in secluded spots in the forests or fields every year in the month of November. All right, he's talking about 1800s when they're still just coming into these areas, right? It's still all jungle here, right? This fact again recalls to the mind the Egyptian custom of placing an urn in the coffins with the mummies to indicate that the spirit of the deceased had been judged and found righteous. The ornament hanging on the breast of Chaacmol's effigy, from a ribbon tied with a peculiar knot behind his neck, is simply a badge of his rank. The same is seen in the breasts of many other personages, in the bas reliefs and mural paintings. A similar mark of authority is yet in usage in Burma. All right, just like in Burma. I have tarried so long on the description of my first important discovery because I desire to explain the method followed by me in the investigation of these monuments to show that the result of our labors are by no means the work of imagination, as some have been so kind a short time ago as to intimate, but of careful and patient analysis and comparison. Also, in order from the start to call your attention to the similarity of certain customs and the funeral rites that the Mayas seem to have possessed in common with other nations of the old world, okay? Because this is the old world. They are the origin, the source. And lastly, because my friend Dr. Jesus Sanchez, professor of archaeology in the National Museum of Mexico, ignoring altogether the circumstances accompanying the discovery of the statue, as published in the Anales de Museo Nacional, a long dissertation full of erudition, certainly, to prove that the statue discovered by me at Chichen Itza was a representation of the god of the natural production of the earth. All right. See what they said? This was a real person. This is Leplajon is telling him, hey, no, this was a real person. And then they were trying to say, no, this was just a statue of the god of natural production of the earth. Yeah, trying to make him into a myth deity, right? Even though he's calling him his friend, he's telling him, hey, he's over here just making things up. And that the name given by me was altogether arbitrary. And also because an article has appeared in the North American Review for October 1880, signed by Mr. Charney, in which the author, after reproducing Mr. Sancho's writing, pronounces ex cathedra and de perse, but without assigning any reason for his opinion that the statue is the effigy of the god of wine, the Mexican Bacchus, without telling us which of them, for there were two. So which one are you talking about? All right. So you see, this is what I'm saying. So Lepla Jones, like, hey, I get what you guys saying, but no, it's actually a real person, statue of a person. They deified him. They deified and made a statue in honor of him. Now, were they supposed to do that? That's a whole different story, right? But that's what he's saying. It says, having been obliged to abandon the statue in the forest, well wrapped in oilcloth and sheltered under a hut of palm leaves, constructed by the Mrs. Le Plongeon and myself, my men having been disarmed by order of General Palomino, then in commander-in-chief of the federal forces in Yucatan, in consequence of revolutionary movement against Dr. Sebastian Lerdo de Tejada, and in favor of General Diaz, I went to Uxmal to continue my researches among its ruined temples and palaces. There I took many photographs, surveyed the monuments, and for the first time found the remnants of the phallic worship of the Nahuatls. Its symbols are not to be seen in Chichen, the city of the holy and the learned men, Itzais, but are frequently met with in the northern parts of the peninsula and all the regions where the Nahuatl influence predominated. There can be no doubt that in very ancient times, the same customs and religious worship existed in Uxmal and Chichen, since these two cities were founded by the same family, that of the Khan. Listen, look, they were founded by who? That of Khan, the Khan's serpent, the Khan dynasty, Khan priest kings, whose name is written on all monuments in both places. Serpents, huh? Drakans. Yeah. Khan and the members of his family worship deity under the symbol of the mastodon's head. So an elephant? Listen to what they tell you. They say people who had elephant as a deity. Sound like the Hindus, right? Is it a deity really? Is that really what are they interpreting it correctly? The Khan, huh? At Chichen, a tableau of said worship forms the ornament of the building, designated in the work of Stevens' Travels in Yucatan as Iglesia. All right. So Stevens saw a monument, a building in one of these Maya cities, and he called it a church. Iglesia means church. And his book Travels in Yucatan, right? So there's a lot of hijacking in his book, actually. Good thing we haven't really like gone into it like that, but yeah, gotta pull out some babies out of there. So he called it Iglesia or church in his book, being in fact the north wing of the palace and museum. This is the reason why the mastodon's head forms so prominent a feature in all the ornaments of the edifices built by them. They also worship the sun and fire, which they represented by the same hieroglyph used by the Egyptians for the sun. All right, the same exact one, huh? If it talks like a duck, walks like a duck, uses the same symbology for the sun like a duck, then it must be a duck, right? But you've seen in reverse, all right? In this worship of the fire, they resemble the Chaldeans or the Irish, the ancient Irish, and Hindus, the Nagas, the ancient Nagas, you mean? Not the Hindus of today, but differed from the Egyptians, who had no veneration for this element. So this is them saying, oh, they worship this, they worship the Master, this is their interpretation. Are they really worshiping or what's going on? Either way, just like these old nations, old world nations, right? The same exact way. They regarded it merely as an animal that devoured all things within its reach and died with all it had swallowed when replete and satisfied. From certain inscriptions and pictures in which the Khans are represented crawling on all fours like dogs, sculptured on the facade of their house of worship, it would appear that their religion of the mastodon was replaced by that of the reciprocal forces of nature imported in the country by the big-nosed invaders, the Nahuatls, big-nosed invaders, huh, Nahuatls, coming from the west. These destroyed Chichen and established the capital at Uxmal. There they erected in all the courts of the palaces and on the platforms of the temples the symbols of their religion, taking care, however, not to interfere with the worship of the sun and fire that seems to have been the most popular. Bancroft, in his work, The Native Races of the Pacific States, Volume 6, we've read a lot of his books, page 277 remarks that the scarcity of idols among the Maya antiquities must be regarded as extraordinary. There's hardly any idols. That the people of Yucatan were idolaters, there is no possible doubt, and in connection with the magnificent shrines and temples erected by them, and rivaling or excelling the grand obelisk of Copan, might naturally be sought for. But in my view of the facts, it must be concluded that the Maya idols were very small, and that such as escaped the fatal iconoclasms of the Spanish ecclesiastics were buried by the natives as the only means of preventing their desecration. That the people who inhabited the country at the time of the Spanish conquest had a multiplicity of gods, there can be no doubt. Well, are they gods? The primitive forms of worship, with times and by the effects of invasion from outside, had disappeared and been replaced by that of their great men and women who were deified and had temples raised to their memory. As we see, for example, in the case of Mu, right? Queen Mu, wife and sister of Chaacmol, whose shrine was built on the high mound on the north side of the large square in the city of Izamal. There, pilgrims flocked from all parts of the country to listen to the oracles delivered by the mouth of her priest and see the goddess come down from the clouds every day at midday under the form of resplendent macaw, right? That, the parrot, the red one, the nice, beautiful one, and light the fire that to consume the offerings deposited on her altar. Even at the time of the conquest, according to the chroniclers, Chaacmol himself seemed to have become the god of war that always appeared in the midst of the battle, fighting on the side of his followers, surrounded with flames. Kukulkan, the culture hero of the Mayas, all right, law-giving priest king or high king, the winged serpent worshipped by the Mexicans. The winged serpent worshipped by the Mexican as the god Quetzalcoatl. They put a G here. The winged serpent, huh? You mean a dragon? Quetzalcoatl, and by the Quiches as Cucumats, it's the same. Cucumats, the Quiches, it's the same as Quetzalcoatl, just like Bochica in Colombia, and just like Veracocha in Peru. If not the father himself of Chaacmol, Khan, at least one of his ancestors, all right? Chaacmol Khan, the priest king. The friends and followers of that prince may have worshipped him after his death, and the following generations seeing the representation of his totem, serpent covered with feathers, on the walls of his palaces and of the sanctuaries built by him to the deity called him Kukulkan, the wind serpent, when in fact the artists who carved his emblems on the walls covered them with the cloaks he and all the men in authority and the high priest wore on ceremonial occasions, feathered vestments, as we learn from the study of mural paintings. In the temples and palaces of the ancient Mayas, I have never seen anything that I could in truth take for idols. Listen, this is what Plejon is telling you. I have seen many symbols, such as double-headed tigers or double-headed jaguars, right, corresponding to the double-headed lions of the Egyptians. It's the same thing. Guys, come on now. Emblems of the sun, huh? I have seen the representation of people kneeling in a peculiar manner, with their right hand resting on the left shoulder, sign of respect among the Mayas as among the inhabitants of Egypt. I've been trying to tell you this is so-called ancient Egypt. That's why. They just drawing it over there. All they doing is retelling the story over there on the walls of ancient America, of the true old world. In the act of worshiping the mastodon head, but I doubt if this can be said to be idol worship. Ken and his son and his family were probably monotheist. The priest king, the masses of the people, however, may have placed a different natural phenomena under the direct supervision of special imaginary beings, prescribing to them the same duties that among the Catholics are prescribed or rather attributed to some of the saints, and may have attributed to them the sort of worship of dulia attributed to the saints, even made images that they imagined to represent such or such deity as they do today. But I have never found any. They worship the divine essence and called it Ku. All right. He has a really big point right there. Like, how come Catholics, you know, they have all these idols and saints, and and then they came here, the same people who had all these saints and Catholics and idols and statues in their churches, talking about the Indians had idols, right? Devil worshippers. It's just, hypocrites. It's hypocrisy. In course of time, this worship may have been replaced by idolatrous rites, introduced by the barbarous or half-civilized tribes which invaded the country and implanted among the inhabitants their religious belief, their idolatrous superstitions, and form of worship. With their symbols, the monuments of Uxmal afford ample evidence of that fact. My studies, however, have nothing to do with the history of the country posterior to the invasion of the Nahuatls. These people appear to have destroyed the high form of civilization existing at the time of their advent and tampered with the ornaments of the buildings. All right, so the Nahuatl invaded these ancient people he's talking about. They messed up, they changed up their culture a little bit, their deities, influenced it, added some hijack. They messed with some of the buildings. This is what he's saying in order to introduce the symbols of the reciprocal forces of nature. The language of the ancient Mayas, strange as it may appear, has survived all the vicissitudes of time, wars, and political and religious convulsions. It has, of course, somewhat degenerated by the mingling of so many races in such a limited space as the peninsula of Yucatan is, but it is yet the vernacular of the people. The Spaniards themselves, who strived so hard to wipe out all vestiges, they did what? They wanted to what? They wanted to wipe out all vestiges of the ancient customs of the Aborigines, were unable to destroy it. Nay, they were obliged to learn it. And now many of their descendants have forgotten the mother tongue of their sires and speak Maya only. In some localities in Central America, it is still spoken in its pristine purity, as for example by the Chaacmoles. All right, so again, this is in the 1800s he's talking about. The Chaacmoles, they were still kind of speaking a little bit of more pure ancient tongue, a tribe of bearded men. They had beards too. The Chaacmoles had bearded men. It is said who live in the vicinity of the unexplored ruins of the ancient city of Tikal. These people were still living in the ruins of Tikal, which at that time, when he wrote this book, guys, it hadn't even been cleared. It was still under jungle, Tikal. It was still under jungle at that time where these Chaacmoles were living, who had beard, right? I wonder what they looked like, right? Who had beard, and they spoke the ancient tongue more purely. It is a well-known fact that many tribes, as that of the Itzaes, retreating before the Nahuatl invaders, after the surrender and destruction of their cities, sought refuge in the islands of the Lake Petén of today, and called it Petenitza, the islands of the Itzaes. Wow. Or in the well-nigh inaccessible valleys defended by ranges of towering mountains. All right, so a lot of the pre-Nahuatl people that were in these lands had to flee because the Nahuatl people came from the north, you know, and they invaded. They took over their kingdoms, right? And that goes along with one of the groups in Costa Rica that I go back to relate to are the Chorotega Indians. The Chorotega's story is that they fled Cholula, Mexico because of the Nahuatl invaders. So this is true history here, guys. All right. So part of my ancestry, the Chorotega part, these people were in Costa Rica, eventually made it to Costa Rica, but they were coming from Cholula. They were coming from Cholula, Mexico. Choluteca in Honduras, related. Choluteca is Chorotega. Choluteca in Honduras is coming from Cholula. They also fled because of the Nahuatl. Chorotega, I mean those who fled, actually. The Nahuatl invaders. So, I know this history. So there they live today, preserving the customs, manners, languages of their forefathers unaltered in the tract of land known to us as Tierra de Guerra. No white man has ever penetrated their zealously guarded stronghold that lays between Guatemala, Tabasco, Chiapas, and Yucatan, the river Usumacinta, watering parts of their territory. So, back then, this was still, again, all unexplored. And this is in the 1800s. And now, what is going on today in the same regions today? They're using the lighter technology, right? They're taking photographs, scanning the area. They're finding so many temples, thousands and thousands and thousands of temples. and under the jungle. Whole cities, guys, whole cities fitting millions of people. They have to rewrite history. That's not going to come out in public to like 100 years. They said it's going to take them 100 years just for the little area they scanned, right, to explore. The Maya language seems to be one of the oldest tongues spoken by man, part of the mother tongue, huh? Since it contains words and expressions of all, or nearly all, the known polished languages on Earth. You guys hear that? It contains a little bit of every language. So what does that tell you? Wow. We went out from here. Who are the ancient Nagas? Who are the so-called Egyptians? Babylonians, Persians, all, all these old world. The name Maya, with the same signification everywhere it is met, is to be found scattered over the different countries of what we term the old world. What we call the old world over there. You can find the word Maya everywhere, just like Buddha's mom, right? Maya. And Buddha's first name is Guatemala. Guatemala. Yeah. As in Central America, the word is found all over. I beg to call your attention to the following facts. They may have no significance. They may be mere coincidences, the strange freaks of hazard, of no possible value in the opinion of some among the learned men of our days, just as the finding of English words and English customs as now exist among the most remote nations and heterogeneous people and tribes of all races and colors, who do not even suspect the existence of one another, may be regarded by the learned philologists, and ethnologists of 2 or 3 thousand years hence. These will perhaps also pretend that these coincidences are simply the curious workings of the human mind, the efforts of men endeavoring to express their thoughts in language that, being reduced to a certain number of sounds, must of necessity produce, if not the same, at least very similar words to express the same idea, and that this similarity does not prove that those who invented them had at any time communication, unless maybe at the time of the building of the hypothetical Tower of Babel. So basically, what he's trying to say is he's finding similarities in languages, right? Like he's finding the same exact words, meaning the same exact thing in America, and then with old languages of the so-called old world, right? And so people tell him, well, that's just maybe a coincidence. It's just human nature to try to make the sound of something. It just happened to be the same sound. Like they create this crazy explanation, right? This is what they're saying. Unless it happened in the Tower of Babel, huh? Then all the inhabitants of Earth are said to have bid each other a friendly good night, a certain evening, and a universal tongue, to find next morning that everybody had gone stark mad during the night, since each one, on meeting 69 of his friends, was greeted by every one in a different and unknown manner, according to the learned rabbis, and that he could no more understand what they said than they what he said. The confusion of languages, huh? And who didn't get his language confused? Eber, right? Remember, Eber separated from the Tower of Babel and he took his family and people, and they didn't get their language confused. So they held on to the original language. Yeah, Eber is Hebrew. We get the word Hebrew, where Abraham conventionally descends from. Eber. It is very difficult without the help of the books of the learned priests of Mayab to know positively why they gave that name to the country known today as Yucatan. I can only surmise that they so called it from the great absorbent quality of its stony soil, which in an incredibly short time absorbs the water at the surface. This percolating through the pores of the stone is afterwards found filtered clear and cool in the cenotes and caves. All right. So what he went over, the part we skipped by the geography of the land, there's actually no running rivers, he's saying, in this whole land. It's just all the waters underneath and caves. There's like massive caves under the Yucatan, guys, filled with water. They don't know where the water comes from or goes, where it goes. This is primordial water, guys. And so they call they have these natural wells all over the Yucatan where they call cenotes. There's literally no running like rivers, guys. It's just caves and the water's all underneath. So in times of dry, like when there's not rain, it's dry unless you know what the cenotes and the caves are, right? The whales. It says Mayab in the Maya language means a Tami, a thief, from the name of the country. No doubt, the Mayas took their name as natural, and that name is found as that of the English today all over the ancient civilized world. Maya. When on January 28, 1873, I had the honor of reading a paper before the New York American Geographical Society on the coincidences that exist between the monuments, customs, religious rites, etc., of the prehistoric inhabitants of America and those of Asia and Egypt, I pointed to the fact that sun circles, dolmen, and tumuli, or mounds, similar to the megalithic monuments of America, had been found to exist scattered through the islands of the Pacific to Hindustan, over the plains of the peninsulas of the south of Asia, through the deserts of Arabia to the northern parts of Africa. And not only these rough monuments of a primitive age, but those of a far more advanced civilization were also to be seen in these same countries. Allow me to repeat now what I then said regarding these strange facts. This is what he told the Academy, right? The American Geographical Society. He said, if we start from the American continent and travel towards the setting sun, we may be able to trace, listen, if we start from the American continent and we travel towards the setting sun, so towards the west, we may be able to trace the route followed by the mound builders to the plains of Asia and the valley of the Nile. All right, can I get a body bag for the illusion? Shout out to Drop, yo. Shout out to Con Drop. All right, where's the true old world? Again, the Americas, because that's where you would have to start from the American continent, and you travel west from there, and you're going to be able to trace the route the mound builders, right, took. The mound builders of America took before they went and civilized Asia and the so-called Valley of the Nile over there. The mounds scattered through the valley of the Mississippi seem to be the rude specimens of that kind of architecture. Then come the more highly finished teocallis or pyramids, right? Teocallis or pyramids of Yucatan and Mexico and Peru. The pyramidal mounds of Maui, all right, listen, one of the Sandwich Islands. The Sandwich Islands, that's what they used to call Hawaii, the Sandwich Islands. Those existing in the Fiji and other islands of the Pacific, which in China we find converted into the high porcelain gradated towers, and these again converted into the more imposing temples of Cochin, China, Hindustan, Ceylon, so grand, so stupendous in their wealth of ornamentation that those of Chichen Itza, Uxmal, Palenque, admirable as they are, well nigh dwindle into insignificance as far as labor and imagination are concerned when compared with them. That they present the same fundamental conception in their architecture is evident. A platform rising over another platform, the one above being a lesser size than the one below, the American monuments serving, as it were, as models for the more elaborate and perfect showing the advance of art and knowledge, okay? That is the models. We got mounds and these pyramids that look very simple, but then you go into bring that knowledge into Hindustan, into Asia, Cambodia, and all these places. Now you got same temples, but then now you got more complex art. Now they're getting more advanced with the art, as he's saying. But they came from the Americas. The knowledge, the foundation of architecture is what he's telling you. The models that they went off are in the Americas. Are you guys listening to me? This is why you don't know about Augustus Le Plongeon, because he was telling people in the 1800s, America is the true old world before they started using their so-called carbon dating methods to try to tell us that the mounds are just built recently and that the other ones in the world, which are literally the duplicates and the copies of these mounds, came much earlier. And that's a whole lie we live in, right? The name Maya seems to have existed from the remotest time in the meridional parts of Hindustan. All right. Valmiki in his epic poem, the Ramayana. We got a whole video on this. And Prince Maya, again, who are the ancient Nagas? They were coming from America, guys. Make sure to catch up on the videos. We shall eventually go over it again, but make sure you get a head start so you can refresh when I do it again. The Ramayana, an epic poem of Hindustan, contains the word Maya, talks about Prince Maya. Again, that was all talking about these people in the Americas coming over there. All right, so Valmiki in his epic poem, the Ramayana, said to be written 1500 before the Christian era, so 1500 BC, in which he recounts the wars and prowesses of Rama in the recovery of his lost wife, the beautiful Sita. Speaking of the country inhabited by the Mayas, describes it as abounding in mines of silver and gold, with precious stones and lapis lazuli, and bounded by the Vindhya mountains on one side, the Prastravana range on the other, and the sea on the third. The emissaries of Rama, having entered by mistake within the Maya's territories, learned that all foreigners were forbidden to penetrate into them, and that those who were so imprudent as to violate this prohibition, even through ignorance, seldom escaped being put to death. Strange to say, the same thing happens today to those who try to penetrate into the territories of the Santa Cruz Indians, or in the valleys occupied by the Lacandones, the Itzayes, and other tribes that inhabit La Tierra de Guerra. So look, in the 1800s, late 1800s, still, guys, there's still remote areas in Mexico. Mayas, ancient, people almost relate to the Mayas that they're not allowing people to go into their territories. They're calling it the land of war, La Tierra de Guerra. The Yucatecans themselves do not like foreigners to go, unless to settle in their country, are consequently opposed to immigration. The emissaries of Rama, says the poet, met in the forest a woman who told them that in very remote ages a prince of the Davanas, all right, the Danites, a learned magician, the Dahenites, Celtic, Chaldean Magi, a druid, a learned magician possessed of great power, whose name was Maya, listen, established himself in the country, and that he was the architect of the principle of the Davanas, all right, who was building all this Maya, but having fallen in love with the nymph Hema, married her, whereby he roused the jealousy of the god Porandura, who attacked and killed him with a thunderbolt. Huh. Now, it is worthy of notice that the word hem signifies in the Maya language to cross with ropes, or according to Brazour, hidden mysteries. By a most rare coincidence, we have the same identical story recorded in the mural paintings of Chaacmol's funeral chamber. All right, the same exact story, guys. And in the sculptures of Chichen and Uxmal, there we find that Chaacmol, the husband of Mu, is killed by his brother Ak. It's the same story who stabbed him 3 times in the back with his spear for jealousy. Ak was in love with his sister Mu, but she married his brother Chaacmol from choice and because the law of the country prescribed that the younger brother should marry his sister, making it a crime for the older brothers to marry her. All right. So I know it's kind of weird to talk about brother and sister and all that, but remember these ancient stories, just like Enki, Enlil, even Adam and Eve and all that, they were having supposedly twins and sisters and so they were hooking up with each other, keeping it in the family, just like royals kind of do, keep it in the family, marry cousins, sisters, and all this stuff that's going on. That's pretty crazy to us, to think about. But remember, this is an ancient tale they're talking about here. All right. In another part of the Ramayana, Maya is described as a powerful asura, always thirsting for battles and full of arrogance and pride, an enemy to Bali, chief of the monkey tribes. Sorry, chief of one of the monkey tribes, by whom he was finally vanquished, the celebrated Indianist. Mr. H.T. Coolbrook, in a memoir on the sacred books of the Hindus, published in volume 8 of the Asiatic Researches, says the Surya Siddha Kantu, the most ancient Indian treatise on astronomy, is not considered as written by Maya, but this personage is represented as receiving his science from a partial incarnation of the sun. Maya is also, according to the Rig Veda, the goddess by whom all things are created. Listen, by her union with Brahma, all things are created. Brahma, Abraham, Sarah, Maya, everything comes out of Maya, huh? She is the cosmic egg, the golden uterus, the Hiranya Garbha. We see an image of it, represented floating amidst the water, and the sculptures that adorn the panel over the door of the east facade of the monument, called by me Palace Museum at Chichen Itza. Emil Burnov, in his Sanskrit dictionary, at the word Maya says, Maya, an architect, all right, Toltec, architects, who's the architects? Who brought architecture out into the world? This is what I'm trying to tell you. Maya, an architect of the that yes, Maya, masculine, magician, prestidigitator, prestidigitator, feminine, illusion, prestige, Maya, the magic virtue of the gods, their power for producing all things. Also, the feminine or producing energy of Brahma. All right, Maya is a deep word within the Hindu, you know, mythology, cosmology, history, oral traditions. I will complete the list of these remarkable coincidences with a few other regarding customs exactly similar in both countries. One of these consists in carrying children astride on the hip in Yucatan as in India. In Yucatan, this custom is accompanied by a very interesting ceremony called Hetzmek. It is as follows. When a child reaches the age of 4 months, an invitation is sent to the friends and members of the family of the parents to assemble at their house. Then, in presence of all assembled, the legs of the child are opened, and he is placed astride the hip of the Naila, or Hetzmek, godmother. She, in turn, encircling the little one with her arm, supports him in that position while she walks 5 times round the house. During the time she is occupied in that walk, 5 eggs are placed in hot ashes so that they may burst and the 5 senses of the child be opened. By the manner in which they burst and the time they require for bursting, they pretend to know if he will be intelligent or not. During the ceremony, they place in his tiny hands the implement pertaining to the industry he is expected to practice. The Naila is henceforth considered as a second mother to the child, who, once able to understand, is made to respect her, and she is expected, in case of the mother's death, to adopt and take care of the child as if he were her own. Literally, literally a godmother, but they actually did do it. Like today, we got godmothers. A lot of them, they're not even in our lives, right? Or they wouldn't even take on the responsibility. It's just like a traditional thing people do, but they don't really practice it. You know, but these people were practicing this godmother thing, right? Now, I will call your attention to another strange and most remarkable custom that was common to the inhabitants of Mayab, some tribes of the Aborigines of North America, and several of those that dwell in Hindustan and practice it even today. I refer to the printing of the human hand dipped in a red colored liquid. Listen, the red hand. This is a big one. This is going in ahead of a future video I was going to show you guys. I forget the person who sent it to me. I forget his name, but he knows who I'm talking about. He sent me an image of the red hand in a Maya temple or building. The red hand, just like what appears to be the red hand of Ulster, the Irish hand, which we know goes back to the red hand of Sarah, the tribe of Sarah, or the line of Sarah, which is the line of Judah, the red hand of the line of Sarah, right? The red croft, the red hand. So again, what? Hey, listen, I refer to the printing of the human hand dipped in a red colored liquid on the walls of certain sacred edifices. This is what he was showing me. Could not this custom existing amongst nations so far apart, unknown to each other, and for apparently the same purposes be considered as a link in the chain of evidence tending to prove that very intimate relations and communications have existed anciently between their ancestors? That's a good question. Yeah. Why would these people be practicing the exact same thing? Where did it get it? Who got it first? That's the thing they don't want us to know. They want to tell us, oh, maybe it was on the others. No, it was in the Americas. We came out of here and brought that culture out. Might it not help the ethnologists to follow the migrations of the human race from this western continent to the eastern and southern shores of Asia across the wastes of the Pacific Ocean? Why aren't they doing it? Why aren't the ethnologists following the migrations out of America into Asia? Into Asia. Why are they not doing it? He's saying, might it not help the ethnologists? Wouldn't it help them? I am told by unimpeachable witnesses that they have seen the red or bloody hand in more than one of the temples of the South Sea Islanders. And His Excellency Fred P. Barley, Esquire, the actual governor of British Honduras, has assured me that he has examined this seemingly indelible imprint of the red hand. The red hand, right? Sarah, the line of Sarah, line of Judah, on some rocks and caves in Australia. There is scarcely a monument in Yucatan that does not preserve the imprint of the open, upraised hand, okay? Upraised hand open, dipped in red paint or some sort, perfectly visible on its walls, okay? The red hand, huh? I lately took traces of two of these imprints that exist in the back saloon of the main hall in the governor's house at Uxmal in order to calculate the height of the personage who thus attested to those of his race, as I learned from one of my Indian friends who passes for a wizard that the building was in my house. I may well say that the archway of the palace of the priest toward the court was nearly covered with them. All right, the red hands he's talking about, all over. Yet I am not aware that such symbol was ever used by the inhabitants of the countries bordering on the shores of the Mediterranean, or by the Assyrians, or that it ever was discovered among the ruined temples of palaces of Egypt. All right, is missing from there. The meaning of the red hand used by the Aborigines of some parts of America has been, it is well known, a subject of discussion for learned men and scientific societies. Its uses as a symbol remained for a long time a matter of conjecture. So why is it on the Irish, one of the Irish emblems, right? It seems that Mr. Schoolcraft had truly arrived at the knowledge of its veritable meaning. Effectively, in the second column of the fifth page of the New York Herald for April 12, 1879, in the account of the visit paid by General Grant to Ramsingh, Maharaja of Jaipur, we read the description of an excursion to the town of Amber. Speaking of the journey to the home of an Indian king, among other things, the writer says, we passed small temples, some of them ruined, some others with offerings of grains, or fruits, or flowers, some with priests and people at worship. On the walls of some of the temples we saw the marks of the human hand, as though it had been steeped in blood and pressed against the white wall. We were told that it was the custom, when seeking from the gods some benison, to note the vow by putting the hand in a liquid and printing it on the wall. This was to remind the gods of the vow and prayer. This is what he's saying. This is what he's interpreting, right? And if it came to pass in the shape of rain or food or health or children, the joyous devotee returned to the temple and made other offerings. In Yucatan, it seems to have had the same meaning. That is to say, that the owners of the house, if private, or the priest, and the temples and public buildings called upon the edifices at the time of taking possession and using them for the first time the blessing of the deity, and placed the hand's imprint on the walls to recall the vows and prayers, and also, as the interpretation communicated to me by the Indians seems to suggest, as a signet or mark of property. Inna, my house. My house or my lineage, right? House. A house can be a lineage, right? House of David, right? House of Judah, right? Oh, there you go. There you go. My house. What house? What specifically house? Oh, my house of Judah, my house of Yasharala. Wow. My house or my house, right? House of David, house of Judah. Hmm. I need not speak of the similarity of many religious rites and beliefs existing in Hindustan and among the inhabitants of Mayab. The worship of the fire, of the phallus, of deity under the symbol of the mastodon's head, recalling that of Ganesa, the god with an elephant's head, hence that of the elephant in Siam, Burma, and other places of the Asiatic peninsula, even in our day, and various other coincidences so numerous and remarkable that many would not regard them as simple coincidences. All right, like literally, guys, they found elephant heads on the temples, on the walls in America, and the Mayas and all these people had them, just like the Hindu. And in his time, he's not saying, "Oh, I don't know if it's an elephant. It looks like an elephant." Like, because later on they try to, hijack the truth and say, "Well, that's not an elephant. They were just portraying a parrot. That's just a long beak." They try to write this off, but to Leprechaun and people in his time, they knew they had found elephants. It looks just like an elephant, guys. I've shown you in my elephant videos. Go check them out. What to think effectively of the types of the personages whose portraits are carved on the obelisk of Copan? What should we think? Were they in Siam instead of Honduras? Who would doubt, but they are Siameses, right? So if they were somewhere else, they would say, oh, yeah, the Siamese people build that, right? But over here, nobody knows. What to say of the figures of men and women sculptured on the walls of the stupendous temples hewn from live rock at Elefanta? So American is their appearance and features, okay? Who would not take them to be pure aborigines if they were seen in Yucatan instead of Madras, Elefanta, and other places of India, all right? This is wow. Body bag for the illusion. Who's the ancient Nagas? Shout out to Drop. Elefanta, right? What is happens in Elefanta over there in India? Well, everything in India looks like American, with American features, they're saying. If now we abandon that country and crossing the Himalayas range, enter Afghanistan, there again we find ourselves in a country inhabited by Maya tribes. Where? Where? Afghanistan. Afghan, wasn't he a son of Jeremiah? Isn't that what I learned from Drop? You correct me if I'm wrong, Drop Nation. Crossing the Himalayas range, enter Afghanistan. There again, we find ourselves in a country inhabited by Maya tribes, whose name, as those of many of their cities, are of pure American Maya origin. Listen, and all the way in Afghanistan. Many of their cities are pure American Maya origin and names, the names of their cities, the names in the fourth column of the sixth page of the London Times weekly edition of March 4th, 1879, we read 4,000 or 5,000 assembled on the opposite bank of the river Kabul. And it appears that in that day or evening they attacked the Maya villages situated on the north side of the river. Wow. This was written when? In 1879. What's going on in Afghanistan? They're attacking Maya villages. Listen, they wrote this March 4th, 1879. Wow. He, the correspondent of the Times, tells us that the Maya tribes form still part of the population of Afghanistan. He also tells us that Kabul is the name of the river on the banks of which their villages are situated. But Kabul is the name of an antique shrine in the city of Izamal. All right? Kogujudo wrote about that in the 1500s, 1600s in his book right here, volume 8, chapter 8. In his book, volume 4, chapter 8. Kogujudo, go look it up. Of his history of Yucatan, he says they had another temple on another mount on the west side of the square, also dedicated to the same idol. They had there the symbol of a hand as a souvenir. To that temple, they carried their dead and the sick. They called it Kabul. They called it what? Kabul. That's a primary source, that same word. So when did they name the river Kabul over there in India? Because they're writing this in the 1500s, 1600s, that word was already in the Americas, right? They called it Kabul, the work in hand, and made their great offerings. All right, a temple. Father Lisana says the same. So we have two witnesses to the fact. Tab in Maya means hand, and bull is to play at hazard. All right? Many of the names of places and towns of Afghanistan have not only a meaning in the American Maya language, but are actually the same as those of places and villages in Yucatan today. For example, all right, the Valley of Chinar would be the Valley of the Well of the Woman's Children, Chen, well, and Al, the woman's children. The fertile valley of Kunar would be the valley of the gods of the ears of corn, or more probably the nest of the ears of corn. As Ku, pronounced short, means god, and Ku, with two U's pronounced long, is nest. Nal is the ears of corn. The correspondent of the London Times in his letters mentions the names of some of the principal tribes, such as the Kuki Kel, the Akakel, the Kamburkel, etc. The suffix Kel simply signifies tribe or clan, so similar to the Maya vocable Khan. A tie, a rope, hence a clan, a number of people held together by the tie of parentage. Now, Kuki would be the Hukil or Hukum, Maya for feather. Feather. Hence, the Kuki Kel would be the tribe of the feather. Kuki Kel in Afghanistan, the people, it literally means tribe of the feather in Maya. Akakel, in the same manner, would be the tribe of the reservoir or pond. Akal is the Maya name for the artificial reservoirs or ponds in which the ancient inhabitants of Mayab collected rain, water for the time of drought. Similarly, the Kamburkel is the tribe of the pleasant. Kambul in Maya, it is the name of several villages of Yucatan. Listen, as you may satisfy yourself by examining the map. You're going to find it. Go do the research. That word Kambul is the name of many villages in the Yucatan. How did that word get all the way to Afghanistan? How come they got the same word? We have also the Saka, Kel, Saka, Sakai, Saka, the Scythians, the Sakai, Saka, Isaac, Isaac, sons of Isaac, the tribe of the locusts, Sak. It is useless to quote more for the present. Enough to say that if you read the names of the cities, valleys, clans, roads, even of Afghanistan, to any of the aborigines of Yucatan, they will immediately give you their meaning in their own language. Before leaving the country of the Afghans, by the Khyber Pass, the Khyber, Eber, that is to say, the road of the hawk, hawk, bell, road, allow me to inform you that in examining their types as published in the London Illustrated Papers and in Harper's Weekly, I easily recognized the same cast of features as those of the bearded men. All right, whose portraits were discovered in the bas reliefs which adorn the ante and pillars of the castle and Queen's box in the tennis court at Chichen Itza, the tennis court, right? What they find in bearded men. Bearded men. They said Indians didn't have beard, man. Bearded men in the stone. On our way to the coast of Asia Minor, and hence to Egypt, we may, in following the Mayas' footsteps, listen, we're following the Mayas' footsteps from Asia Minor, right, from America to Asia Minor into that land they're calling Egypt today, right? We may in following the Mayas' footsteps, noticed that a tribe of them that learned Maya, with their Rab Mag at their head, established themselves in Babylon, where they became indeed a powerful and influential body. Their chief they called Rabmag or Labmak, the old person, Lab old Mac person, and their name Magi meant learned men, magicians, as that of Maya in India. That's where really Magi, learned men. I will directly speak more at length of vestiges of the Mayas in Babylon when explaining by means of the American Maya the meaning and probable etymology of the names of the Chaldaic divinities. At present, I am trying to follow the footprints of the Maya, all right? And what he was doing right here is big. Like his correlation that has something to do with the Chaldeans. Remember, guys, we have a whole video of Mayas and Chaldeans and all that. He actually did write that. And I think in the book Queen Mu. And we read a little bit of it. But remember the Chaldeans? Who's the Chaldeans? What are we really talking about? Talking about were they calling Asia Minor or was that in Ireland? Much closer to the Americas, which would make more sense. We were going over to the British Isles in ancient times so much. On the coast of Asia Minor, we find a people of a roving and piratical disposition, whose name was from the remotest antiquity and for many centuries the terror of the populations dwelling on the shores of the Mediterranean, whose origin was and is yet unknown, who must have spoken Maya or some Maya dialect, since we find words of that language and with the same meaning inserted in that of the Greeks. Okay, Greek is coming. A lot of the Greek looks like old Paleo Hebrew, coming from a lot of the old Latin looks like Paleo Hebrew. So this is what I'm saying. What is the real mother tongue? All right, that the Mayas, he's saying, were one of the oldest of the original tongues. All right, that's why. So the same meaning as the Greeks, who Herodotus tells us used to laugh at the manner the Carians or Catas or Caribs spoke their tongue. Wow, yo, body bag with the illusion. Yo, shout out to Drop, yo, Con Drop. Wow, I didn't expect to read this here. We got a whole video from a whole other author, right? Shadow of Atlantis, I believe. That whole series we got, the Shadow of Atlantis book we read. We got a whole chapter talking about the Caribs are the Carians, that the Caribs are the ancient Carians that ended up in so-called Asia. And in Asia, they don't know where they originated. They don't know where the Carians came from. And that's why we were telling you they are the Caribs or the Catas. Cata means black. Caribs. And Augustus Leplejon is telling you the same thing right here. How does he know? He's telling you the same thing right here. The left says Herodotus tells us used to laugh at the manner the Carians or Catas or Caribs spoke their tongue, whose women wore a white linen dress that required no fastening, just as the Indian and Mestiza women of Yucatan even today. The Caribs, are the Carians. All right, get that video we did. Go get the whole drop. To tell you that the name of the Catas is found over a vast extension of country in America, right? Catalina would be to repeat what the late and lamented Brasseur de Bourbourg has shown in his most learned introduction to the work of Landa, Relación de las Cosas de Yucatán. But this I may say, that the description of the customs and mode of life of the people of Yucatan, even at the time of the conquest, as written by Landa, seems to be mere verbatim plagiarism of the description of the customs and mode of life of the Carians of Asia Minor by Herodotus. It seems like it's the same exact story, like he just copied it from him, but he didn't. He got it from the Indians. You guys understand? Wow, the Carians are the Caribs. If identical customs and manners and the worship of the same divinities under the same name, besides the traditions of a people, pointing towards a certain point of the globe as being the birthplace of their ancestors, prove anything, then I must say that in Egypt also we may meet with tracks of the Mayas, of whom name was again have a reminiscence in that of the goddess Maya, the daughter of Atlantis, worshipped in Greece. All right. And remember who these titans and gods, Greek mythology, so-called Phoenician mythology, so-called Atlantis mythology. Yeah, here, Atlantis America. It all goes back. It's all the same gods, just being passed on, names changing. It's the same story. Here at this end of the voyage, we seem to find an intimation as to the place where the Mayas originated. We are told that Maya is born from Atlantis. In other words, that the Mayas came from beyond the Atlantic waters. Here also we find that Maya is called the mother of the gods. Kubelis. Ku. There goes that word again. Ku. We just broke down earlier, right? Ku, Bel, Kubal. Maya, God. Bel, the road, the way. Kubel, the road, the origin of the gods as among the Hindustanis. Kubel. These we have seen in the Rig Veda, called Maya, the feminine energy, the productive virtue of Brahma. It's the same exact thing and attributes that the ancient Greeks give, the same day that the Hindus give the word Maya. I do not pretend to present here anything but facts, resulting from my study of the ancient monuments of Yucatan and a comparative study of the Maya language, in which the ancient inscriptions I have been able to decipher are written. Let us see if those facts are sustained by others of a different character. I will make a brief parallel between the architectural monuments of the primitive Chaldeans, their mode of writing, their burial places, and give you the etymology of the names of their divinities in the American Maya language. All right, let's see what he has to say. It says the origin of the primitive Chaldees, the primitive Chaldees, Caledonia, huh? Primitive Chaldeans, huh? Chaldees, the Ireland, Ur of the Chaldees, huh? The origin of the primitive Chaldees is yet an unsettled matter among learned men. The Chaldees come from Arphaxad. You guys remember? Arphaxad is one of Shem's sons. Arphaxad is actually one of the progenitors of Eber, right? Or ancestors of Eber as well. That's where the line of Eber is coming from that son of Shem, Arphaxad. But Arphaxad had other children, and through the other children, eventually you get the Arphaxads, which became the Chaldeans, right? And again, all these people are mixing with the Hebrews too. So that's why, remember, eventually Abraham and his people are living in Chaldea. All right. Put it all together, guys. But he's admitting to you they don't really know where they originated. I'm telling you, we've read it and the annals of Ireland and all that. And the British Isles, they tell you. Some profess in one opinion, others another. All agree, however, that they were strangers to the lower Mesopotamian valleys. They weren't from there, where they settled in very remote ages, their capital being in the time of Abraham, as we learn from scriptures, Ur or Ur. So Ur, Ur, so named either because its inhabitants were worshippers of the moon or from the moon itself. U in the Maya language, or perhaps also because the founders being strangers and guests, as it were in the country. It was called the city of guests. Ula, Maya, guests, just arrived. All right. So it's pretty interesting that he's correlating that the ancient Chaldeans might be Mayas, because we already know that there's a strong relation, right? Talking about relations with ancient people of the British Isles and ancient America, so-called Atlantis, Greater Ireland. It was there. When we talk about the island, there was actually a whole land called Ireland, that started from all the way to South America, all the way to Ireland, all the way to the British Isles. Yeah, Ireland. We got a whole chapter read on that. Recent researches in the plains of Lower Mesopotamia have revealed to us their mode of building, their sacred edifices, which is precisely identical to that of the Mayas. All right, body bag for the illusion. Identical to that of the Mayas, all right? The foundation of their buildings, the ancient ones in Mesopotamia. It consisted of mounds composed of superimposed platforms, either square or oblong, forming cones or pyramids, their angles at times, their faces at others, facing exactly the cardinal points. Their manner of construction was also the same, with the exception of the materials employed, each people using those most at hand in their respective countries: clay and bricks in Chaldea, stones in Yucatan. The filling in of the buildings being of inferior materials, crude or sun-dried bricks at Huarca and Mugrir, of unhewn stones of all shapes and sizes in Uxmal and Chichen, faced with walls of hewn stones many feet in thickness throughout. Grand exterior staircases lead to the summit, where was the shrine of the god and temple. In Yucatan, these mounds are generally composed of 7 superposed platforms, the one above being smaller than the immediately below. The temple or sanctuary containing invariably 2 chambers, the inner one, the sanctum sanctorum, being the smallest. In Babylon, the supposed Tower of Babel, the Nimrut, the Birthi Nimrut, the Temple of the Seven Lights, was made of 7 stages or platforms. The roof of these buildings in both countries were flat, the walls of the vast thickness, the chambers long and narrow, with outer doors opening into them directly. The rooms ordinarily led into one another. Squared recesses were common in the rooms. Guys, here they're describing the Tower of Babel. Remember what they're saying about the Pyramid of Cholula, how it resembles the Tower of Belus or Tower of Babel. Look how they're describing this. It almost sounds like if you picture the Pyramid of Cholula, right? How it is. Remember, that's a mountain with many layers, many rooms. Yeah. So continue, says Mr. Loftus is of opinion that the chambers of the Chaldean buildings were usually arched with bricks, in which opinion Mr. Taylor concurs. We know that the ceilings of the chambers in all the monuments of Yucatan, without exception, form triangular arches. To describe their construction, I will quote from the description of Herodotus. See? So this is what I'm saying, guys. They're not actually, when we get in these old descriptions of these old buildings, supposedly, that were in Mesopotamia, supposedly, they're not looking at them describing, they're actually getting it from Greek writers. So what were they really describing? They could have been describing the Pyramid of Cholula. And then they're trying to tell you it was over there, but they don't have it there today. It's gone. Again. So if you want to get the description of the construction, he's going to get it from Herodotus, a Greek, so-called Greek, of some ceilings in Egyptian buildings and Scythian tombs that resemble that of the brick walls found at Mugir. The side walls slope outward as they ascend. The arch is formed by each successive layer of brick, from the point where the arch begins, a little overlapping the last, till the 2 sides of the roof are brought so near together that the aperture may be closed by a single brick. Some of the sepulchres found in Yucatan are very similar to the jar tombs common at Mugir. These consist of 2 large open-mouthed jars, united with bitumen, after the body has been deposited in them, with the usual accompaniments of dishes, vases, and ornaments, having an air hole bored at one extremity. Those found at Progreso were stone urns about 3 feet square, cemented in pairs, mouth to mouth, and having also an air hole bored in the bottom. Extensive mounds, made artificially of a vast number of coffins, arranged side by side, divided by thin walls of masonry, crossing each other at right angles, to separate the coffins, have been found in the lower plains of Chaldea, such as exists along the coast of Peru and in Yucatan. At Izamal, many human remains contained in urns have been found in the mounds. The ordinary dress of the common people among the Chaldeans, says Canon Rawlinson, in his work, The 5 Great Monarchies, seems to have consisted of a single garment, a short tunic tied around the waist and reaching thence to the knees. To this may sometimes have been added an abba, or cloak, thrown over the shoulders. The material of the former we may perhaps presume to have been linen. The mural paintings at Chichen show that the Mayas sometimes used the same costume. All right, this is what I'm saying to you guys. They're saying the Chaldeans are dressed like that. They're getting that from descriptions, not because they saw them. They're getting them from paintings, drawings, and stuff in the walls, not because they saw these people. See, that's the thing, guys. In the murals, right? We know these are ancient. In these murals, they're showing the Mayas dressed the same, exact same. You can see them. They don't got no place to go see. They're getting it from like writings of Greeks and all these ancient people, right? Which could have been in the Americas. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. They could have been in the Americas writing that. So that's why they look the same. Yeah, they were describing the so-called Chaldeans. Yeah, so-called Maya. Yeah, the Maya dress the same because they are the same people, most likely. Again, the mural painted Chichen showed that the Mayas sometimes used the same costume, and that dress is used today by the Aborigines of Yucatan and the inhabitants of the Tierra de Guerra, the people, the territories where they can go, where they had these old school remnants of the people who had fled the Nahuatl. This is still in the 1800s, right? They were still there, guys. They were still dressing like that. They were also barefooted and wore on the head a band of cloth, highly ornamented with mother of pearl instead of camel's hair, as the Chaldee, just like the Chaldee, just like the Chaldee ancient Irish. This band is to be seen in bas relief at Chichen Itza, in the mural paintings and on the head of the statue of Chaacmol. The higher classes wore a long robe extending from the neck to the feet, sometimes adorned with a fringe, with fringes, all right? Can't make this up. It appears not to have been fastened to the waist, but kept in a place by passing over one shoulder, a slit or hole being made for the arm on one side of the dress only. In some cases, the upper part of the dress seems to have been detached from the lower, and to form a sort of jacket which reached about to the hips. We again see this identical dress portrayed in the mural paintings. The same description of ornaments were affected by the Chaldees and the Mayas bracelets, earrings, armlets, anklets made of the materials they could procure. The Mayas at times, as can be seen from the slab discovered by Brasseur and Mayapan, an exact facsimile of which cast from a mold made by myself is now in the rooms of the American Antiquarian Society at Worcester, Mass. As the primitive Chaldee in their writings, listen, just like the Chaldeans, listen, made use of characters composed of straight lines only, enclosed in square or oblong figures, as we see from the inscriptions in what has been called hieratic form of writing, ancient Paleo Hebrew, found at Huarca and Mugir, and the slab from Mayapan and others. Man. So look at all the correlation he's trying to do with the Chaldeans. That makes so much sense to me, knowing that possibly we know, these biblical people came out of the true Holy Land, the Americas. Whoever was biblical people going into Ireland and the British Isles must have come out of the Americas. So it kind of makes sense to me that he's correlating Maya with Chaldean. We know also the Gulf Stream, right? The Gulf Stream, right from the Gulf of Mexico, right from Yucatan. If you get caught in the Gulf Stream, where is it going to bring you? It's going to, without paddles or anything, it'll bring you right to Ireland. It'll bring you right over to Europe, going up the east coast of America over the top, down to the British Isles, going into the Iberian Peninsula. It brings you there. It makes sense what the guy's saying here. But you got to have the real orientation, the real locations, not the fake Babylon place they give us today. The Chaldees are said to have made use of three kinds of characters that Canon Rawlinson calls letters proper, monograms, and determinative. The Maya also, as we see from the monumental inscriptions, employed three kinds of characters, letters proper, monograms, and pictorial. It's almost the same. It may be said of the religion of the Mayas, as I have had occasion to remark, what the learned author of the Five Great Monarchies says of that of the primitive Chaldees. The religion of the Chaldeans, from the very earliest times to which the monuments carry us back, was in its own outward aspect a polytheism of a very elaborate character. It is quite possible that there may have been exoteric explanations, known to the priests and the more learned, which resolving the personages of the pantheon into the powers of nature, reconcile the apparent multiplicity of gods with monotheism. I will now consider the names of the Chaldean deities in their turn of rotation as given us by the author above mentioned and show you that the language of the American Mayas gives us an etymology of the whole of them, quite in accordance with their particular attributes. Not just that they have a meaning in the Maya language, these Chaldean words, but they actually almost mean the same as what they're given these people or God's attributes of. It's the same. All right, we're gonna get into that. But what we're gonna do, guys, we're gonna get in that in the next part of this reading. We're gonna read the whole book. There's still about another 40 pages we got to get through. So we're going to do probably two parts. All right. So we just got the drop here in this first part. We're going to definitely continue reading the rest of the pages, hopefully soon, tomorrow, the next day, and finish the book. But again, I don't want to make the videos too long, just so people can make the time to actually sit through and hear all the reading, not fall asleep, not get bored and say, "Oh, that's too long. I'm not even going to watch that." It's just him reading. All right. I hope you guys understand. I know it's good information. I'm excited about it. But we're going to get into those names of these gods, right? And how they have meanings in the Maya language and actually almost mean the same as what they're attributing to these ancient deities of the so-called old world, Egyptian, Chaldean, Babylonian, Phoenician. We already know where they got all this from, coming from so-called Atlantis/America. So it's just more corroboration. We're just gonna get more details, okay? Again, shout out to Leplejon for doing this in his time. Again, Leplejon knew America was true old world. All right, so we're gonna get into that on the next reading. I do appreciate you guys sticking around the whole reading, that we did today to the end. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, more proof this is the true old world. There was so many people, so many archaeologists, ethnologists, anthropologists, right, saying this, writing about America and its ancient people, and trying to show people how important it was and how much influence they had on the ancient world and how it actually was the center and origin of civilization. All right. Again, this was Vestiges of the Mayas, or facts standing to prove that communications and intimate relations must have existed in very remote times between the inhabitants of Mayab and those of Asia and Africa. All right, by Augustus Leplejon, 1881. 1881. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawa.